Jonah Cairn brushed cigar ash from the lapel of his canvas work coat and swung open the side door of the Lyric Crown Opera House. The grand double doors on Main Street had long ago been locked for the night, but an old brass key, chipped and polished by decades of nervous thumbs, admitted him by the alleyway entrance used by stagehands, cats, and, so the rumours went, ghosts. Jonah was not much for rumours. He was 59, widowed, and blessed with ears that could pick a loose pulley out of a symphony. The management kept him on the payroll chiefly because he was the ghost light keeper, the one who arrived after every curtain call to roll a single bare bulb onto centre stage. The tradition served a practical purpose, preventing actors from tumbling into the orchestra pit when the house lights were off, but everyone treated it as an exorcism, a glowing sentinel against whatever mischief lurked in an empty theatre. He liked the routine. In the hush after an audience's roar, he alone strode the boards, smelling resin, grease paint, hot dust, and the sour tang of spilled wine in the stalls. He would switch on the lonely lamp and sit a while, thinking of his late wife who had loved arias and balconies. Then he would make a last circuit of the fly tower, checking knots, sandbags, and counterweights before the cleaners arrived at dawn. Tonight's performance, Puccini's Tosca, had ended half an hour ago. The star soprano, Valentina Moreau, had drenched the final high C in molten gold, sending shivers even through Jonah, who measured sound in foot-pounds of pulley torque. While the crowd applauded, he'd leaned in the wings, admiring not her voice, but her composure. Nobody could call Moreau timid. Rain hissed against the roof. He reached the stage door, rapped twice in the old code for courtesy, and entered. A faint hum came from the power-saver bulbs above the stage, but otherwise the Lyric Crown did its best impression of a mausoleum. Jonah fetched the ghost light from its corner, unfurled the cord, and rolled the stand to centre stage. The bare filament flickered once and settled into a steady glow. "Evening, Marjorie," he said. Marjorie was the theatre's supposed spectre, a Victorian costume seamstress who had died of pneumonia beneath the eaves. Jonah had never seen her, but he found talking to an invisible co-worker eased the echoing quiet. He lowered himself onto a stool at the prompt corner. His knees creaked. Rain hammered louder, a military tattoo on the iron rafters, yet somewhere above it he heard another rhythm. The soft rasp of hemp against wood. Rope. The fly system had been re-rigged last summer with modern wire, but several older lines remained for specialty drops. They shouldn't be moving. He'd locked every arbor brake before the show. Jonah stood, frowning. He scanned the battens 40 feet up, but saw only shadow. Then something passed between the ghost light and the back wall. An outline, human-shaped but too swift, too fluid. It glided across the stage left wing and vanished into darkness. "Who's there?" His voice bounced from plaster cherubs high in the proscenium. No answer. The rope's whispering ceased, leaving only water's patter. He crossed to the locking rail. Each lever stood upright, secure. The weights hung still. Yet one of the hemp lines on the auxiliary rail sagged as though recently disturbed. Jonah gripped it. The fibre was warm. Someone had worked this line moments ago. Security had left at 10. Performers were at the after-party across town. No one should be here but him. A chill, earthier than any auditorium draft, slid beneath his coat. He reminded himself that burglars sometimes slipped in through the loading dock, hoping to lift microphones or silver candelabras from the props cage. Maybe one of them had got lost in the flies. He dug a flashlight from his pocket and ascended the narrow iron ladder at stage left. Each rung clanged under his boots. From the grid he could peer down at the maze. Ropes, counterweights, catwalks. The ghost light, way below, seemed tiny as a votive candle. Nothing moved. He walked the catwalk's length, checked every cleat, and finally descended again. Still nothing. Spooked by creaks, old man, he told himself. Jonah chalked the incident up to nerves and finished his duties. He unplugged the acoustics mics, latched scenery wagons, and finally flipped off the work lights. The ghost light remained, a single glowing guardian. He left. Yet in the alley, locking up, he paused. Through the brick wall he thought he heard rope sliding again, too faint to trust. The hairs on his arms prickled. He resolved, before tomorrow's dress rehearsal, to inspect every inch of the fly system. The following afternoon he arrived early. As technicians placed risers and electricians aimed parkins, Jonah ascended each ladder and examined the gear. He found nothing amiss except the same hemp line, which held a slight new kink, as if tension had been applied then released. He untied it, recoiled the rope, and locked the lever with a brass padlock. Unless someone had another key, nobody would move that line. Dress rehearsal began. Valentina Moreau sang with controlled fury, flinging her silk shawl through imaginary moonlight. When they reached Act Two's climax, the director paused and asked Jonah to stand in for an absent carpenter. He complied, raising and lowering a prison cell backdrop with a cue sheet. Everything ran smoothly. During break, Valentina approached him at the coffee urn. She was younger up close than her stage presence suggested. Early 30s, freckles across her nose, eyes like tempered steel. "Mr. Cairn," she said, reading his name stitched on his coat. "Thank you for assisting. I know these ropes can be temperamental." "Pleasure's mine, ma'am. I've worked them since before you were born. They mind me." She smiled thinly. "Do they? Because I heard our chorus boys gossiping about a saboteur, a shadow in the galleries." Jonah stiffened. "Who told you that?" "Rumours bloom like black mould," she replied, lowering her voice. "Somebody's been loosening knots on my drop cues. I am no diva of superstition, but I cherish caution. Would you keep your ears open?" "I keep more than ears. I'll lock every lever." Valentina bowed her head once, a queen acknowledging a loyal knight, and returned to rehearsal. Jonah spent the rest of the afternoon on heightened alert. He fetched his own padlocks for additional lines. When rehearsal concluded, he decided to remain inside until curtain time that evening. No chance for mischief if the theatre never emptied. But at 7, the director insisted he go eat. "We've got security on the doors, Jonah. Get supper." Against his instincts, Jonah walked 2 blocks for stew. He returned at 8, scanning every corner. Finding nothing disturbed, he sighed relief, until a stagehand dashed from the wings. "Jonah, counterweight snag. We need you, quick." In the stagehouse jumble, they discovered a sandbag split open, grain spilling like guts. The rope had frayed halfway through as if sawn. Jonah cursed softly. He had inspected that very line hours ago. The director declared it accidental wear. Jonah insisted otherwise. To calm the room, he replaced the bag and tied in a fresh safety. Performance time arrived. The audience filed in, chattering opera patrons with opera expectations. Jonah stationed himself in the upstage left corner, where he could watch both the locking rail and the performers. His pulse felt like a timpani roll in his throat. Act I passed without trouble. Act 2, same. During intermission, he patrolled the darkened house, every aisle and exit. All secure. Act 3, the final act, opens atop the ramparts of Castel Sant'Angelo. Valentina, as Tosca, would sing her anguished aria beneath a dawn sky, then ascend a staircase to the battlement, where she would leap to her death off stage as the orchestra thundered. A rope backstage, threaded through pulleys, hauled the battlement flat during blackout. Its line was separate from all others, and now locked with one of Jonah's padlocks. He watched the scene begin. Valentina stood on the set's stone parapet, voice soaring. The audience held its breath. Jonah kept his eyes on the rope. Then he felt, rather than saw, movement overhead. A shadow slid along the catwalk, black against black. Before he could shout, a metallic click rang out. The brass padlock he'd fastened snapped open and clattered on the floor. The battlement line went slack. Instantly, the flat began to tip forward, threatening to spill Valentina onto the real stage below. She wobbled, almost missed her note, but kept singing, professional until death. Jonah sprinted. With one hand, he grabbed the rope, wrapping it around his forearm, jerking it taut. The sudden strain stopped the flat mid-tilt. Pain speared his shoulder. Valentina finished her phrase, stepped to safety, and the stage manager killed the lights. Orchestra crashed to a halt. The audience murmured. "House lights!" bellowed the director. As illumination flooded the stage, Jonah glimpsed the shadow racing along the catwalk toward the loading gallery door. He shouted, "Up top!" but his warning drowned in commotion. Valentina, pale, stared at him, realizing how close she had come to being crushed, or worse. Yet the worst was still a beat away. The freed battlement rope was not the only one the saboteur had touched. While Jonah lashed it off, another, thinner line, one he had explicitly retired long ago, whipped down from above. It carried at its end a noose, the classic slipknot taught in textbooks of theatrical fly operations. The loop passed over Valentina's head and yanked upward before anyone could react. Her scream sliced the air, cut short as the rope tightened around her throat and hauled her toward the flies, an obscene marionette of a diva. The audience erupted, some thinking it part of a gruesome effect, others realizing catastrophe. Stagehands surged forward, but dared not grab her feet, which kicked 5 feet above the boards. Jonah, instincts older than fear, seized the line at the rail and braked it with his leather palms. Heat seared skin. He wrapped the rope around a cleat. Valentina hung choking, face mottled. Jonah called to 2 carpenters. Together, they hauled the rope sideways, guiding her to the stage floor, where others lifted her onto a chaise. Someone cut the line with a utility knife. Valentina gasped, just enough breath left to sob. Red welts ringed her throat. The house curtain crashed down. The director strode forward, eyes blazing, demanding to know what demon had invaded his stage. Security found no one on the catwalks. The loading gallery door, 50 feet high, stood ajar, but the exterior fire ladder was slick with rain and would have squealed under weight. Yet no prints, no footfalls, no shadows remained. An ambulance whisked Valentina to hospital. She would live and perhaps sing again, doctors said, but not soon. Ligaments bruised, voice uncertain. Police arrived. They measured ropes, dusted padlocks, interviewed half the company. Jonah recounted everything: the shadow, the rope, the padlock. They thanked him, promised to check fingerprints, and left before dawn, leaving the Lyric Crown under suspicion of haunting. Management closed the theatre for 2 days. Jonah did not sleep. He haunted the building like the ghost light itself, searching for signs. On the second night, he climbed to the loft above the grid, a crawl space few remembered. Rat droppings, cobwebs, antique scenery flats with illegible French labels filled the gloom. Something else, too. A bedroll, a stack of batteries, a hacksaw, and a folder of photographs. The photos were of Valentina, at rehearsals, at restaurants, stepping from taxis. Some were taken from above, through the lattice of catwalks, her image bisected by steel beams. On the folder's cover, someone had scratched a name repeatedly until the paper tore, Elias. Jonah froze. Elias Merritt had been a rigger who worked here 5 seasons before. Fired after an accident injured a ballerina. Rumour said he'd been stalking the principal dancer and loosened a flying harness to punish her for rejecting him. Never proven. He disappeared into the gig circuit. Jonah took the evidence to the director and police. Warrants were issued. They found Merritt's last address empty, walls plastered with clipped reviews of Valentina Moreau's triumphant roles. The man remained at large. A week later, management decided to reopen with a gala benefit, part fundraiser for Valentina's recovery, part exorcism of bad press. They hired extra security and consulted an engineering firm to replace every rope with steel cable. Jonah insisted a ghost light alone could not safeguard them. He drafted new rules. No one in the fly tower alone, all padlocks keyed uniquely, nightly sweeps by 2 staff minimum. Management agreed, yet fear lingered. Ticket sales dipped. Patrons whispered about the hanging of the Nightingale. The night before reopening, Jonah performed his ritual. He rolled the ghost light to centre stage, whispering to Marjorie. Then he spoke to another presence, though he did not believe in prayer. Elias, if you're still here, understand this. You've already lost. She lives, and the theatre endures. Go haunt some other dream. Silence answered. Jonah made his rounds. Every rope now bore a security seal. Break it, and an ink ampule stained your hands. He climbed the catwalk, inspected beams with a flashlight. Nothing. Descending, he paused halfway. A smell, faint as struck matches, drifted from the grid. He lifted the trap door and shone his light. Above, the crawlspace bedroll was gone, but something new lay where it had been. A photograph of Jonah this time, leaning over the rail during the accident, his face tense, heroically lit by footlights. Across the bottom, scrawled in marker, "Next." Jonah's fist tightened. He tucked the photo in his pocket and descended. He did not call police. They would arrive too late. Whoever left that photo was either still inside or planning to return. Jonah had a plan of his own. He fetched a coil of bright red nylon static line, rigged for mountain rescue, from the props shop and clipped it around his waist. Then he waited in the wings, lights off, only the ghost lamp burning. Midnight chimed from the city hall clock. Rain began, always rain on the bad nights. Footsteps padded on the roof. Jonah's heart kicked. He felt the tug of the static line. He'd anchored it to a downstage steel eye bolt, giving him a lifeline if someone tried to toss him off the catwalk. The roof access hatch creaked. A slender figure in dark clothes descended the ladder, landing cat-like on the catwalk. Moonlight through skylights silvered the intruder's profile. High cheekbones, stubble, eyes glittering with a fanatic's light. Elias. Jonah, 60 feet below, used the static line to pull himself noiselessly up the side stair to the fly rail. As Elias began unlatching newly installed seals, Jonah called, "Evening, son. Might want to reconsider your timing." Elias spun, saw Jonah, and smiled a terrible smile. "Old man Cairn, hero of the opera, come to take your bow." "I came to switch off the light. and perhaps end this. Elias drew a utility knife, blade gleaming. The diva survived, but you won't. The theatre needs a sacrifice, Mr. Cairn. A legend. He lunged along the catwalk toward the ladder. Jonah retreated up the stairs to meet him at the rail. Below, the ghost light flickered, as if anxious. They met on a narrow metal platform. Elias slashed. The blade nicked Jonah's sleeve. Jonah swung a crescent wrench he'd carried, connecting with Elias's forearm. The knife clanged onto the grate. Elias screamed, grabbed Jonah's jacket, and both men slammed against the rail. The drop yawed beneath, orchestra pit gaping. Elias grappled, trying to heave Jonah over, but Jonah unclipped his static lines carabiner from his belt and snapped it to the catwalk's safety ring. Elias didn't notice until he shoved Jonah outward, and the rope jerked taut, saving him. Off balance, Elias toppled instead. Jonah grabbed his wrist. "It's over," Jonah grunted. Below, security burst in, summoned by motion sensors Jonah had subtly activated. Elias thrashed, but Jonah's grip, tempered by decades of rope hauling, held. Guards climbed and cuffed the would-be phantom. Months passed. Valentina recovered, though a darker husk shaded her brilliant voice, lending Visidate a haunting quality adored by critics. She returned for a revival of Tosca. Opening night, the lyric crown thrummed with electricity. New rigging, new insurance, same ghost light. Backstage, before curtain, Valentina found Jonah coiling cord. "They tell me you saved me twice," she said. He shrugged. "I just keep the light burning." She touched the fresh rope marks still faint on her neck. "Would you watch tonight, as always?" "From the wings," he promised. She extended a hand. He took it, surprised at its firmness. "You, Mr. Cairn, are the keeper not only of light, but of lives." He smiled, embarrassed, and rolled the ghost lamp away. The curtains parted. Music rose, unbroken by sabotage. 40 feet above, new wires gleamed like harp strings, silent, obedient. In the darkness, Jonah stood sentinel. He had no illusions. Theatres bred stories as surely as applause. But legends, he'd learned, were not made by shadows alone. They were shaped by those who kept lights burning when all else went dark. He folded his arms, listening to the overture, and for the first time since that awful night, felt the opera house breathe easy.